Ainsley, said the Duke of Belchurch with a laugh, reaching for the decanter. Good God, Heatheridge, she is plain and dull. One might as well marry the furniture. He heard the sound before he had finished pouring. It was very small. It was the smallest sound a house can make. The soft, apologetic click of a door that has been standing open being drawn quietly shut by someone on the other side of it. Nathaniel Cathcart, 7th Duke of Belchurch, stood with the decanter in his hand and the stopper in the other, and did not move at all. Was the door open? Said Heatheridge. Yes, said Nathaniel. The fire spat. Somewhere out in the long stone corridor a step went away, an unhurried step, neither running nor lingering, the step of a person walking at exactly the pace she always walked, and faded and was gone. Ah, said Heatheridge. Nathaniel put down the decanter without drinking from it. He crossed the library in 5 strides and pulled the door open, and the corridor was empty, and on the flags outside, face down where it had slipped from somebody's hand and not been picked up, lay a book. He knew the book. It was the 3rd volume of his father's Georgics, the one with the cracked spine, and Miss Ainsley had asked his permission to borrow it in September and had returned it, punctually every time she finished it, and borrowed it again a week later for 3 years. He stood in the cold corridor of his own house with the book in his hand for what felt like a long time. Belchurch, said Heatheridge from the doorway uncomfortably. It is not. That is, she cannot have been standing there. Servants take a message and go. She is not a servant, said Nathaniel. Well, no. Poor relation of somebody, isn't she? Companion to your sister. She is the daughter of a gentleman, said the Duke of Belchurch, and she has lived under my roof for 3 years, and I have just called her a piece of furniture at the top of my voice with the door standing open. He looked down at the book in his hand. Go to bed, Heatheridge. He did not sleep. He had said it carelessly. That was the whole of it, and he could not make it any better by turning it over, though he turned it over until 4 in the morning. He had said it carelessly, and lightly, and with a laugh, because Heatheridge had made the mild and obvious observation that a Duke of 35 who wished to be left alone might do worse than marry a quiet, sensible woman already in the house, and because the notion had struck Nathaniel as absurd, and because it was late, and because he had drunk 2 glasses of his father's port and was in the mood to be amusing, plain and dull. One might as well marry the furniture. 3 years. She had come to Belchurch in the spring after his father died, when Honoria was still keeping to her room and would see nobody, and the physicians had said a companion, and the agency had sent Miss Prudence Ainsley, aged 25, of Hartwell in the county of Salop, daughter of a country attorney lately deceased and possessed of nothing whatever. Nathaniel, in the grip of the black weeks after the funeral, had received her for 4 minutes in that same library and had not looked at her once. And in the 3 years since he had spoken to her, he made himself count it lying in the dark, perhaps 400 times. Good morning, Miss Ainsley. Is my sister well today? Thank you, Miss Ainsley. Yes, do. As you think best, that will do very well. Good night. 400 times, and he could not now, at 4 in the morning, have said with any certainty what colour her eyes were. Grey, he thought, or hazel. He did not know. He came down early, which he never did. She was in the breakfast room at the far end, pouring his sister's chocolate, and when he came in she rose and curtsied exactly as she did every morning of the world. Good morning, Your Grace, Miss Ainsley. That was all. She sat down and buttered his sister's toast and cut it into fingers because Honoria's hands shook in the morning, and she asked Honoria whether she had slept, and she talked in her low, pleasant voice about a letter from the vicar and a hare in the kitchen garden, and whether the lilac would be out for the fair. She did not look at him once. She was perfectly civil. She was in fact exactly what she had been for 3 years, courteous, useful, mild, invisible. And Nathaniel sat at the head of his own table with his coffee going cold in front of him and discovered that a woman being perfectly civil to you can be the most terrible thing that has ever happened in your life. Miss Ainsley, he said when Honoria had been taken up to rest. She stopped in the doorway with the tray. Your Grace, he had rehearsed it in the dark for 6 hours. It went out of his head entirely. Last night, he said. In the library, the Georgics, said Miss Ainsley pleasantly. I dropped it. I am ashamed of my clumsiness. I hope it has taken no hurt. It was very good of you to pick it up." She was looking at him now, and her eyes were grey, and there was absolutely nothing in them at all. "Miss Ainsley, Lady Honoria will want her drops at 11, she said. "If your grace will excuse me." And she went out, and the door closed behind her with the same soft, apologetic click, and Nathaniel Cathcart stood in his breakfast room and understood that he had been dismissed from her presence in his own house, so gracefully that no one on earth could ever have proved it had happened. She gave notice on the Friday. She did it properly. She went first to Honoria, and then she wrote to him, a note on a half sheet, in a small clear hand, and Rigby brought it in on a salver at 11 o'clock in the morning. "Your Grace," it said, "it is with much gratitude that I must beg leave to resign my situation at Belchurch. I have been offered the mistressship of the girls' charity school at Kettleby in Yorkshire, and having no expectation of a better opportunity, I have accepted it. I hope to be released by the end of the month, though I will of course remain as long as Lady Honoria requires me. I am, Your Grace, most sincerely obliged for 3 years of kindness in this house. P. Ainsley. 3 years of kindness in this house." Nathaniel read it 4 times. Then he went and found his sister. Honoria was in the yellow parlour with her feet up, and she was crying, and she was so angry that she could hardly speak. "What did you do, Honoria? Do not." His sister's voice cracked. "She has been here 3 years, Nathaniel. She has read to me every evening for 3 years. She learned to sit up with me at night when the pain was bad, and she never once told you, because you were not to be troubled. She taught me to laugh again, when I did not want to be alive. And on Thursday she came upstairs looking as though she had been struck across the face, and she has been packing her boxes ever since, and she will not tell me why, and she will not say one word against you, and that is how I know it was you." The room was very quiet. "I said Nathaniel, that she was plain and dull, and that a man might as well marry the furniture. He heard himself say it. She was outside the door." Honoria stared at him. Then she said quite calmly, "Get out of my parlour." "Honoria." "Get out of my parlour," said his sister, "and do not come back until you have understood what you have done. And Nathaniel, you have not the faintest idea. Not the faintest. You think you were unkind for a moment, and now you are sorry, and that being sorry is a thing you can bring her, like a shawl." She turned her face to the window. "That woman has been unregarded her whole life. Her father was proud of her, and he died. And she came here, and she made herself useful, and she made herself quiet, and she made herself small enough to fit in the corners of your house, and every day for 3 years she told herself that she did not mind it. And on Thursday night she heard the master of the house explain to his friend, laughing, exactly what she is." Honoria's voice went to a whisper. "You did not insult her. You confirmed her. He walked for 4 hours. He walked out past the home farm and up onto the ridge where the whole of Belchurch lay below him, the house, the park, the 11-mile wall, the church tower, the village, the 50 roofs of a place that had belonged to his family since Agincourt, and he stood in the cold March wind and tried, for the first time in his life, to see it as it must look to a woman with no money in it. And standing there, he began to notice things. He noticed that there was a new roof on the almshouse. He came down and asked the steward about it, and the steward, surprised, said that Miss Ainsley had put it to him 2 winters ago that the almshouse leaked, and had suggested that if the timber came from the estate's own fall, the cost would be under £20, and had written it out for him so that it might be laid before his Grace, and his Grace had signed it. And there it was. He did not remember signing it. He asked what else he had signed. It took the steward 3 days to make the list, and Nathaniel sat in the library with it and went through it line by line, and at the end of it, he put his head in his hands. The school at Belchurch village opened 2 winters ago, 31 children. The Michaelmas coal for the widows, the rebuilt pump, the apple orchard let out in strips to the cottagers, the letters, hundreds of letters, in 3 years. From tenants and pensioners and the widows of his father's servants, all of them answered warmly and in his name, and he had signed them at breakfast without reading them, because Miss Ainsley had a good hand and a good head, and it saved him 20 minutes. Every kind thing that had been done at Belchurch since his father died had been done by a plain, dull woman he could not have described, and he had signed his name at the bottom of it, and taken the thanks of the village, and had never once wondered where any of it came from. He began clumsily to court her, and did not know that that was what he was doing. He sent her flowers from the hothouse. They were returned to the hothouse the same afternoon in the same jug, with a note saying that Lady Honoria's room was very much brightened by them, which was true, and which was also the most elegant refusal Nathaniel had ever received in his life. He offered her a raise of £30. She thanked him and said that as she was leaving in 3 weeks it would be dishonest to accept it. He sought her out in the corridors, and she was always going somewhere, and always civil, and always gone. So at last, having no other course, he did the one thing he had never done in 3 years. He sat down in the same room with her and stayed there. She read to Honoria every evening from 7 until 9. Nathaniel came in at 7 on the Monday with his book and sat down in the chair by the fire and did not say anything. Miss Ainsley's voice did not falter. She read for 2 hours. She was reading Cowper, and she read well, plainly, without performing, letting the sense come through. And at 9 she closed the book and said good night to Honoria, and to him she said, "Your Grace," and went out. He came again on Tuesday, and on Wednesday. On Thursday she read Virgil in the Latin, because Honoria had asked for it, and she construed it as she went along, easily, without stopping. Nathaniel looked up from his book. "You have Latin," he said. Miss Ainsley's eyes came up over the page. They were grey, and they were, he saw at last, extremely intelligent, and they had a temper behind them that had been kept on a chain for 3 years. "My father taught me," she said. "He had no son. You have been 3 years in this house, and I did not know you had Latin." "There was no occasion, Your Grace," said Miss Ainsley, "for a piece of furniture to have Latin," and she lowered her eyes and went on reading calmly from the middle of the line, and Honoria made a small sound and put her hand over her mouth. It was the only time she ever said it. Nathaniel sat perfectly still and took it, and did not defend himself, because there was no defense, and afterward, walking the corridor to his own room, he found that it was a strange thing to feel, he found that he was glad. She had struck him. She had at last struck him. Anything in the world was better than that pleasant civil nothing. He came again on Friday. Lady Selina Farquhar came to Belchurch in April with her mother, on the understanding held by both families, by the county, and by every hostess in 3 ridings, and never once by Nathaniel himself, that it wanted only a fine week and a little privacy to settle the matter. She was very beautiful. He had known her since she was 17. She had a white throat and a fortune and the finest seat on a horse in the county, and she had never in her life said a thing that Nathaniel could remember an hour later. She noticed Miss Ainsley on the 2nd day. "Your sister's woman," she said, over the tea things amused. "She has the most extraordinary way of appearing. One turns and there she is with the shawls. Does she never speak? I made her 3 remarks yesterday and got back 3 yeses. She has a great deal to do," said Nathaniel. "She has a face like a Friday in Lent." Lady Selina laughed, and looked round the table for the laugh, and got it from her mother and from Heatheridge, and from 2 of the Belchurch cousins, and at the sideboard, where she was pouring Honoria's chocolate with her back to the room. Miss Ainsley's shoulders did not move at all. "Poor creature," said Lady Selina comfortably. "One is sorry for them, plain and dull, and no way in the world to help it." The words went through the room like a knife going into a cushion, soundlessly and all the way in. Nathaniel set down his cup. "Miss Ainsley," he said, "will you sit down?" Every head at that table turned. Miss Ainsley stood at the sideboard with the chocolate pot in her hand, and for one moment, one only, Nathaniel saw the whole thing in her face, the outrage and the exhaustion, and something far worse than either, which was the flat certainty that this too was going to be survived. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said. "Lady Honoria is expecting me." And she went out with the tray and left him there. That night he stood at the window of the long gallery, in the dark, and watched a single candle moving along the upper corridor of the east wing, her window, then the stair, then her window again for an hour and a half, and he understood, with the cold total clarity of a man who has been struck by lightning at the age of 35, that he was in love with her. Not sorry, not guilty, not ashamed, though he was all 3. In love with her. with the way she cut the toast into fingers because Honoria's hands shook, with the ferocious, unshowy competence of a woman who had rebuilt a village while he shot pheasants. With her Latin and her grey eyes and the 2 hours of cowper and the small apologetic click of a door being drawn shut with dignity by a woman who had just been called furniture and was not going to give anybody the satisfaction of a sound. She was not plain. That was the joke of it, the enormous, filthy joke at his own expense. She had never been plain, he had simply never looked, and a man does not see what he has decided in advance is not there. She left on the 29th of April. He came out to the carriage because he was not going to be a coward twice. Honoria was weeping into her handkerchief on the steps. The servants had come out, all of them, the whole household, which nobody had ordered, and stood along the gravel in the rain, and old Rigby, who had been at Belchurch 50 years and had never been known to show a feeling, handed Miss Ainsley into the chaise himself and then stood back and blew his nose like a trumpet. Miss Ainsley had one trunk. 3 years, and she had one trunk and a hat box, and the cracked 3rd volume of the Georgics under her arm, which Nathaniel had sent up to her room with a note begging her to keep it and which she had not sent back. He stood at the carriage door. Miss Ainsley, Your Grace. I have been trying for 6 weeks, he said, to find a way to say a thing to you, and I have not found it, and you are getting into that carriage in about a minute, so I shall say it badly. His hand was on the door frame and it was not steady. I was wrong, not merely rude, wrong. I have looked at you every day for 3 years and seen nothing, and that is not a fault in your face. Madam, it is a fault in my eyes, and I have spent 6 weeks discovering how great a one. He drew breath. Do not go to Yorkshire. Stay. Stay in any capacity you choose to name and on any terms you choose to set, and let me learn you. I am asking you to give me time. The rain came down on the gravel. Miss Prudence Ainsley sat in the carriage with her hands folded in her lap and looked at him, and her face was quite kind, and that was the worst of it. Your Grace, she said, I believe you mean every word. Then. And in 6 months you will be bored. She said it without bitterness, which made it unanswerable. You are a good man who has done a cruel thing and has been shocked to find himself capable of it. And you are very sorry, and you are trying to put it right, and you have got it into your head that the way to put it right is to be in love with me. She looked down at her hands. But it is not love, Your Grace. It is remorse. Remorse is very warm, and it is very sincere, and it burns exactly as long as the guilt does. And then one morning it goes out, and there I should be, the woman you married because you were ashamed of yourself. And I should spend the rest of my life watching your face at breakfast to see whether it had gone out yet. He could not speak. I have been unregarded all my life, said Miss Ainsley, and her voice shook for the first time, and she steadied it. I have borne it. What I could not bear, what would kill me, Your Grace, and I say it plainly because I shall not see you again, is to be regarded for 6 months and then unregarded by a man whose bed I shared. It is not remorse, said Nathaniel. Then prove it, she said. And she pulled the carriage door shut with a soft click, and the coachman clicked his tongue, and the chaise went away down the avenue in the rain with the whole household standing in it, watching, and Nathaniel Cathcart stood on his own steps for a long time after it had gone out of sight. Prove it. She had not said that she disbelieved him. She had not said that she did not care for him. Prove it. He went back into the house and sat down in the library where he had said it, in the chair he had said it from, and stared at the fire until it went out, and then he began, slowly and coldly and quite methodically, like a man drawing up a plan of campaign, to work out what a proof would look like, and how much it would have to cost him, before a woman who had been given nothing all her life could possibly believe it was real. He did not follow her to Yorkshire. That was the first thing, and it was the hardest, and it was the beginning of everything else. A man in love and in the wrong wants above all things to be forgiven, and to be forgiven quickly, and Nathaniel understood, sitting in the cold library at 3 in the morning with the fire dead. That every instinct he had was to get into a chaise and drive north and stand in front of her and say it again louder, which would have proved nothing whatever, except that he was a duke and was used to being answered. So he stayed. He wrote to her instead. 1 letter a week, every Sunday for 31 weeks. He did not plead in them. He had decided that pleading was simply a handsomer word for pressing, and he had pressed her enough for one lifetime, he reported. He reported that he had gone through 3 years of the estate letter book, and had found 406 letters in her hand and his name, and had spent a fortnight reading them, and had been ashamed. He reported that he was now answering the tenants himself in his own hand, badly, and that Mrs. Loach of Pye Farm had written back to say that His Grace's letter had been very kind, but that Miss Ainsley's used to say more in half the length. He reported that he had opened a second school at Wickham, and a third at Belchurch Ford, and that he had made every inquiry himself, and had sat in the back of the schoolroom on a bench too small for him, and had discovered that 31 children being taught to read is the loudest thing in England. He reported that Honoria had begun to walk in the garden. He reported that he had ended the understanding with Lady Selina Farquhar. He did that in July, and he did it properly. He rode to Farquhar Court and asked for her father and then for her, and he told her the truth, which was that he had never offered for her and had allowed the world to believe he would, and that this had been a cowardice, and that he was sorry for it and would say so publicly if she wished. Lady Selina had gone very white and then very cold, and had said, "There is someone else." "Yes." "Who?" "That is not a question I will answer," said Nathaniel, "and I would ask you to consider, Lady Selina, whether you would truly like me to." She understood. He saw her understand, and she said with real venom, "You will be laughed at from here to London." "I expect so," said the Duke of Belchurch. He went round the county in a fortnight and round London in 3. The Farquhars saw to that. He lost half his invitations and the whole of his consequence in 6 drawing-rooms that had petted him since he was a boy, and Hetheridge told him, with the frankness of an old friend, that he had made himself perfectly ridiculous. He wrote all of it to Prudence Ainsley, plainly, on a Sunday, and did not ask her for anything. She did not answer, not once in 31 weeks. In November he sent, by carrier, a locked deed box. Inside it was a settlement, £5,000, in trust, endowing the girls' charity school at Kettleby in perpetuity, a proper building, a house for the mistress, coal books, 40 places, and the mistress-ship of it for life, held by Miss Prudence Ainsley and by no one else, with the trustees named as the Vicar of Kettleby, a Leeds attorney, and Lady Honoria Cathcart. The Duke of Belchurch was not a trustee. The Duke of Belchurch had no power over it, no visitation, no rights of any kind whatever. It could not be taken back, and it could not be used, and there was nothing in the world that it obliged her to do. There was one line of writing with it, on a half-sheet, in his hand. "This is not an offer, it is not a bribe, and it is not a hook. It is yours whether or not I ever see your face again. You spent 3 years making a place better, and let another man's name stand on it. That is finished. B." That was in November. He heard nothing. Honoria wrote to her at Christmas. Honoria had written every week too, and had been answered every week, and had told her brother precisely nothing about it, which he bore because he had earned it. And this time Honoria came into the library with the letter in her hand, and her face very strange. "She is coming for 12th night," his sister said. Nathaniel got up so fast that his chair went over. "For me," said Honoria before he could speak. "She is coming for me, Nathaniel. I asked her, and she is coming to see me, and she has said in the plainest terms that she comes as my guest and on no other footing at all, and that if you make her a scene, she will take the next coach." His sister's eyes filled. "But she is coming." The 12th night ball at Belchurch was a thing the county had gone to for 200 years. There were 300 people in the long gallery that night, and every one of them knew the story. The Duke who had thrown over Selina Farquhar for nobody at all. The Duke who had turned schoolmaster. The Duke who had made himself ridiculous. And they came in from the snow with their eyes very bright, because they had heard, from somebody who had it from somebody, that Lady Honoria's old companion was in the house. She came down at 9 o'clock. She wore grey silk, plain, unornamented, 3 years out of fashion, and no jewels, and her hair was done as it had always been done. And she came down the great stair of Belchurch on the arm of Honoria Cathcart, walking slowly, at Honoria's pace, and she did not look at anybody in that gallery at all. She was, Nathaniel thought, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life, and he had lived in a house with her for 3 years without noticing it, and he would be answering for that until the day he died. The county stared. The county whispered. And Lady Selina Farquhar, standing beneath the Belchurch banner with a glass of champagne in her hand, said, clearly, sweetly, into the exact hush that fell as the two women reached the foot of the stair, "Well, plain and dull after all. Is that what a duke throws away a Farquhar for?" The gallery went absolutely silent. Prudence Ainsley stopped. She did not flinch. She simply stopped and stood there with Honoria's hand on her arm and lifted her chin and prepared. Nathaniel could see her preparing. He had seen it 100 times and had never once understood what he was seeing to survive it. He walked out into the middle of the floor. "No," he said. His voice went the length of that gallery and came back off the stone. "Lady Selina has quoted me," said the Duke of Belchurch, "and she has quoted me correctly. I said it. In the library of this house, on the 14th of March last, at 11 o'clock at night, with the door standing open, laughing, with a glass in my hand, I said of Miss Prudence Ainsley that she was plain and dull, and that a man might as well marry the furniture. 300 people did not move. She was outside the door," he said. "She heard the whole of it. She picked up her book and walked away down my corridor and never told a living soul, and came down to my breakfast table the next morning and cut my sister's toast for her, and was perfectly civil to me for 6 weeks, and left this house in April with 1 trunk. He turned, slowly, and looked at that room, at the whole county, at the men he had shot with and the women who had wanted him and the cousins who had eaten at his table for 30 years. "You are going to hear that sentence for the rest of your lives," he said, "and I should like you all to hear the rest of it, so that you may repeat the thing accurately. That woman rebuilt the almshouse. She opened the school in the village and taught in it herself on Wednesdays, and never told me. She answered 406 letters from my tenants in my name and my hand, and every one of them was kinder than I would have been, and every one of them was signed by me without reading. She sat up at night with my sister for 3 years, through pain that would have made most of you scream, and never once mentioned it, because I was not to be troubled." His voice cracked and he let it. "Everything good that has been done at Belchurch since my father died was done by her. I took the credit for all of it, and I called her furniture." Somewhere in the gallery a woman was crying. "Plain," said Nathaniel. "She has grey eyes and she has Latin, and she is the cleverest person in this room, and I looked at her for 3 years and I saw nothing, and that is not a want of beauty in her, ladies and gentlemen. It is a want of sight in me. I have spent 9 months getting my eyes open. 'Tis very hard work. I recommend it." He crossed the floor to the foot of the stair. Prudence Ainsley stood there with her face white and her hands shaking and her chin still up. "Miss Ainsley," said the Duke of Belchurch, and went down on one knee on the cold flags in front of 300 people. "You told me to prove it. I have not come to ask for a reward. You owe me nothing, and the school is yours whatever you say to me tonight. And if you tell me to go, I shall go, and there will be no scene. And you may take Honoria's carriage in the morning, and I will never trouble you again." He looked up at her. "But I am 35 years old," he said, "and I have never once in my life wanted anything I could not buy, and I want you, not because I am ashamed. I was ashamed in March. I have been in love since April, and I have had 9 months and 1 whole county laughing at me to find out the difference." He held out his hand, palm up. "Marry me, Prudence, not to mend what I did. Because there is no room in England I would not rather be poor in with you than rich in without you, and because you are the only woman I want, and because I have been reading Virgil for 9 months and I still cannot construe it, and I am not going to spend the rest of my life with the furniture." For a long moment she did not move. Then Prudence Ainsley began helplessly through her tears to laugh, the unguarded, astonished laugh he had heard perhaps 4 times in 3 years and had never once been the cause of, and she put a hand into his hand. "You never could construe it," she said. "Your Latin is a disgrace." "Then you had better stay," said Nathaniel, "and teach me." They were married at Belchurch Ford in the small church in the spring, and the 31 children of the school sang so loudly and so badly that the bride laughed all the way down the aisle. Lady Selina Farquhar married an earl within the year and told everybody she had had a lucky escape. The county came round as counties do. It took 18 months, and it was accomplished in the end not by the Duke of Belchurch's rank or his temper, but by the simple fact that the new Duchess turned out to know the name of every tenant's wife in 3 parishes and to have read more books than the bishop. And on a warm evening in the following June, Nathaniel came into the yellow parlour at 9 o'clock and found his wife asleep in the chair by the window with the cracked 3rd volume of the Georgics open on her knee, and Honoria dozing opposite her, and the last of the light coming in across both of them. He stood in the doorway for a long time, and did not go in, and looked at her. Plain, he thought. Good God! He would be looking at her, he supposed, for the next 40 years, and it would not be nearly enough to make up the 3 he had wasted, but a man does what he can. He crossed the room quietly and took the book out of her hand before it fell, and marked her place and set it down, and when she stirred and opened her grey eyes and said sleepily, "You are staring at me again, your grace," the Duke of Belchurch said, "Yes," and did not stop.